since the second half, really, how much they've really struggled. Charged with finding some stability from this.
And today, my guest is Dan Ritchie. Dan is the Colts 1 coach at North's Rugby Club in Brisbane. He was previously the Director of Rugby at Brisbane State High. During our conversation, we spoke about wearing different hats as a first 15 coach and getting to know your players and reducing your risk. We spoke about having a feedback framework of what do we need to stop doing, what do we need to keep doing, and what do we need to start doing. We also talked about how training through games and having chaos and mess in your training sessions is good for letting the players sort things out for themselves. On a recent trip to Brisbane, I spent a night with Dan watching his Colts train, and I really took a lot away from watching Dan, talking to Dan, and just talking rugby with him. Feel free to reach out to him if you're in Brisbane, but otherwise, sit back, relax, and as always, pass this on to anybody that you think can benefit from it. Once again, thanks for your time, Dan, and I hope everyone enjoys.
Can't find it. That's a mighty shot. A mighty Leicester.
Mate, let's make a start, and we'll just go where it takes us.
Sweet as.
All right, Dan. So thanks for joining me tonight. Just for the listeners that may not know who you are, who are you, where are you, and what's your involvement in the grassroots game?
Thanks, Bully. Thanks for having me. Dan Ritchie is my name. I'm currently in Brisbane. I coach the Colts 1 or the under-20s side at Norths in Brisbane. Prior to that, I was director of rugby at Brisbane State High School for 3 years in the GPS competition. Brisbane born and bred. I played all my rugby in Brisbane for Norths. Was fortunate enough to play some first grade and then spend 3 years traveling sort of overseas and playing rugby in Scotland and Canada, which was really cool life experience and rugby experience. And then came back, had 1 more year playing. And then, you sort of realize that you're sitting there analyzing what the coach is doing instead of what you're doing. And it's probably time to move in a different direction. So I chose to focus on coaching, but I'd always sort of coached. Being a teacher by trade, I'd always sort of coached early. So I got into it pretty early. And then, just wherever it's taken me, which is where I am now. So, yeah.
Yeah, great. No, thanks, Dan. Thanks for your time. Because I know this time of year we're all pretty busy with rugby stuff. So what actually got you into coaching in the first place? I know you sort of said you've done it for a while, but when you sort of decided it was time to take it seriously?
As I said, I always sort of coached. As I say, that last year in particular, I was playing. It was probably the first time I was really not enjoying it. I was the oldest in the playing group, and as I say, I sat there analysing what the coaches weren't and were not doing, and it was a source of frustration. At the time, I was teaching at a boys' school in Brisbane, and before I'd gone away overseas, I'd obviously started there and come back and. Group of boys actually said to me, "Oh, look, Sarah, you're going to keep playing next year." And at that point, I wasn't really sure. And they said, "Look, we're 2 years into the first 15, and we've won 2 games in 3 years, and we really need a change. We're sick of losing. We just want something different. Would you put your hand up?" And that's pretty hard for a 15, 16-year-old kid to do. And these kids I got along really well with. I taught them as grade 7 boys and coached them and just had so much time for them. And when they sort of said that to me, I was sort of, okay, that's probably not the worst sort of segue to exit playing, I guess, and focus more on the coaching. So funny enough, that was sort of the moment. I didn't quite get that job that asked me for, but I think that the timing and as I say, sequence of events there was probably the right one to go more coaching rather than playing.
Yeah, no, that's good, mate. That's interesting because some people got different journeys into it. That's the first time I've had someone sort of say I got sort of convinced to do it a long time ago and just kept going from there, but not many people do. So in your coaching journey, what's some of the one of the biggest heartbreaks or disappointments that you've had? Because we've all had them as coaches, and I think the good coaches look at it and go, "Yeah, that was crap. That was terrible," but they reflect and they learn from it and they move on. And as a young coach, we often don't do that very well. So it's more about letting these young coaches know that there are tough times, and the good coaches get through them, and not just to throw your toys out of the cot and walk away.
Well, again, probably leading on from what I was just saying before, you say heartbreak and disappointment, and at the time it was, but I actually look at it now and go, it was probably the best thing that happened to me. So as I say, I put my hand up for a first 15 job, one that I was really confident I could make a bit of a difference. And, I already sort of knew the kids that were there and the environment and everything like that. Put together a sort of 3-year plan and looked at how we could sort of change things a little bit. First of all, get the boys enjoying their rugby again, which was probably the biggest thing. Anyway, I missed out on that, and I can still remember it clear as day. Interviewed, and I was teaching at the time, and the person came down to deliver the news and said, "Oh, you weren't successful. We're going to reappoint the existing coaches," and you could have knocked me over with a fly when I heard that. And I'll never forget, there were boys in that class who had that initial conversation with me, ironically, and you sort of have to brush it off and go back in and keep teaching. And they're pretty smart kids. So they sort of worked out what was happening and kept prodding away. And as a teacher, you just play a straight bat, don't you? And then, eventually they got it out what had happened. And as I say, I was pretty disappointed, probably because of the group of boys I was potentially going to be working with. So, disappointed for that for a couple of days. And then I was really fortunate. I got a lot of good people around me that I trust in the rugby circles, and, probably moaned for a little bit. And then about 6 weeks later, out of the blue, it's funny, isn't it? When things pop up, and I got a phone call out of the blue from Brisbane State High School, which was ironically not far from where I was working. And I didn't know any people there, and they just said, "Look, asked around, heard you might be interested in a change." Obviously they've just won a first 15 premiership, which was pretty big, and they said, "Would you like to come down and teach and be the director of rugby?" And at that point I wasn't even thinking about changing jobs or anything. I was probably kicking stones a little bit, but when that came up, as I say, it ended up being the best thing that happened to me, that 3 years I spent there. So it was disappointing at the time, and but I look back now and go, well, things happen for a reason sometimes. So that was, as I say, it was more the group of players that I was potentially working with, and the place I worked, I really enjoyed. It's a great place. So that aspect was disappointing, but that opportunity that State High gave me, I'll never forget that.
Yeah, no, that's really good, mate. Like you said, sometimes you don't get that job because something else is just around the corner. So that's some good advice. So let's flip that on its head, mate. What's some of the greatest moments you've had because again, we've all had good moments, and they far outweigh the bad. Otherwise, we wouldn't keep doing what we do. But what's some of the greatest moments that you can share with the listeners?
To be honest, Bully, what I'm doing at the moment, coaching the Colts, this is my second season in there now. And as I said, Norths is a club I played for. And when the opportunity came up to come back, it was the program probably wasn't in a great shape. And from where we started to where we are now, and look, we're obviously winning games now, which is great, and there's still a lot of rugby to be played. But it's not even about the results. I'm seeing a group of players each week that are just, they care so much about the jersey, they care so much about each other, and they care about the club. And I think that's something that was probably missing. And as I say, for me, it's a little bit personal in the sense that you want to see that pride that my group of mates and I had when we came through Colts and through to first grade and things like that. And just seeing these blokes get better every week. They all came out of school not as rock stars or big name players or rep players or anything like that, but last year, for example, we had six players make there were 2 Queensland Under-19 teams last year, and 6 boys made that from our club, which was really incredible. We had 9 guys make their first grade debuts last year, which was pretty special as well. And then, as I say, the last few weeks, we're really starting to see, I guess, the seeds sown from that initially when we started. So, just where we're at now from where we've come from is for me. And I've always had a soft spot for, programs that, you love those rags to riches stories, don't you? But, this is something that I'm, really immersed in. And as I say, these players, they just care so much about it, and watching them get better every week is what's made me so proud. Like, a couple of weeks ago, we probably defended our try line for, I reckon, 20 out of the 35 minutes in the second half, defending a lead, and held them out, right until the last play. And I'm not ashamed to say it. Like, it actually brought me to tears, because listening to that roar right at the end when they got that last turnover, like, I'd never seen that type of grit, and just how they erupted just got me a little bit emotional. So that sort of stuff, seeing that and feeling that, that's just made me so proud recently.
No, that's good, mate. And like you said, they're the things that we look at, is how we can improve the team and how we improve the players, make them better humans as well. What's some of the lessons that you've learned over your time coaching that you could share to help some of the newer coaches, just to keep them on the right track, especially around that Colts schoolboy stuff, because they can be difficult ages. I know down here in Melbourne, Colts is a difficult age group to keep the kids involved in, and some of the stuff with the schoolboys is you've got, kids that want to play rugby and kids that are there because mum and dad want them to play, or they've got to play a sport. So, they can't play AFL, so they come and play rugby. So you've got a big skill set gap. So it'd be good to get some lessons that you've learned coaching in that space.
Again, if I go back to my time at State High, and I was there for 3 years, and I would say we ran that program to give it some context. State High is the only public school in a private school competition, GPS competition. So there's elements of the school that are very much a government school, and there are elements of it that are part of a private school, boys and girls, sporting programs. So in essence, we're sort of up against it, or we were up against it, in many facets. And we probably ran that program on the smell of an oily rag. But one thing I took away from that, or one of many things, I reckon I crammed 9 or 10 years worth of learning in a 3-year cycle there. I wore a number of different hats, teacher of 6 classes, maths, science for start, director of rugby, but you're a guidance counselor, you're a coach, you're an administrator, you were everything. And what it taught me is that you can have all the bells and whistles you like, and don't get me wrong, there are some outstanding programs. Every program in the GPS competition is outstanding. You can have all the bells and whistles, you can have all the resources, but what it comes down to is how you treat and how you make the people feel. And when I say people, I mean the players, obviously, and also your volunteer coaches. And I had an incredible army of volunteer coaches from different walks of life and different experience. And, I lent on every person I could in my rugby network who had something to gain from being a part of the program. But I just sort of found that even with the limited resources, if you treated the coaches well, and really tried to make life as easy for them as you could, that was obviously a start. There were people keen to be involved in a coaching capacity who probably didn't have a lot of experience. So the more support and resources I could provide them, I found that those people would come back year after year. And then the students, the kids themselves, we were talking before about differences in ability, and that was that program, because we had a merit entry enrollment process where students who demonstrated a good ability in rugby could come to the school from outside of the local catchment area. And I guess people would compare that to the equivalent of a scholarship, even though they paid levies and all that. So you had those sort of students coming into the school, and then you had students who'd never played before. So trying to find that, I used to call it a Rubik's cube of balance, was really important. But getting to know these kids first and foremost was that was the most important thing. And we had a very large Polynesian community at State High, and each of them had a different story. And some of the things I heard and some of the things you're trying to manage during the week, I'd never encountered before. I can't play today because I've got church, or I've been called up to the hospital to have a medical procedure that I've been on a waiting list for 3 years for, or mum and dad need the car to take my 4 younger siblings to their game, and I just don't know how I can get there. So you would have all these expectations around turning up on time, attending training, and initially you go into it and you get really frustrated. And I certainly did. They're late, they're this. But when you actually delve into the problem a little bit deeper, I guess one of the things I took away from it was, well, how can we reduce the risk and provide solutions rather than flying off the handle when someone's late or hasn't turned up. And you knew that there was always a reason why that they hadn't turned up. We have to travel to Toowoomba, for example, which is about 2 hours from Brisbane on a bus. And you had to leave pretty early in the morning, and that was difficult for some families. So you had to make sure that, well before that communication and transparency was really clear in terms of, hey, we really need you at the bus at this time. And you had to make sure that when you were planning that, you gave the bus enough time in case we did have to wait for some families or students. So not really a rugby X's and O coaching answer, but it's a pretty good starting point, I think, in terms of getting to know your individuals, and what's their home life like. Like, what's are mum and dad dropping them off? Are they here because, and you said it before, Bully, do mum and dad want free babysitting essentially, or are they really wanting to be a part of something? So trying to grow their experience, was a constant challenge that you're trying to work out. How can you capture everyone? You can't capture everyone, but I think giving everyone the time of day as best you can was usually a pretty good starting point. And we had some really good coaches in our program who, tactically, they probably didn't set the world on fire, but geez, the kids just loved turning up for them, because the conversations they had, they weren't even about rugby. They were, how's school going? How's mum? How's dad? How's your 4 younger siblings? Things like that. And those were the people that really made that experience pretty incredible for a lot of kids.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, mate. I remember when I coached some under-16s a few years ago now, and I thought there's no point going off at the kid for being late, because they don't drive, so and one guy was always late, and he goes, "Oh, sorry, Dad doesn't finish work till 5:30, and we started training at 6. And I went, "Dude, no problem." Like, he was there at 6:05 instead of 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I went, "Mate, that's no one's fault at all. But thanks for, once, and like you said, once you delve into what's going on in their home life, it can save a lot of heartache down the track. And not that you cut them any slack, but Billy's going to be 5 minutes late because Dad doesn't finish work till 5:30, and we had one kid travel, I think it was 45, like from the other side of Melbourne.
Yeah, right.
To play at the club. And every now and again he'd be 5 minutes late, and you'd go, "Yeah, mate, no problem." Like, yeah, so sometimes it's not necessarily the kid's fault that they're not there, or they're, like you said, they've got grandma's in hospital and mum and dad have got the car at the hospital, or, families turned up.
Yeah,
family arrived this afternoon. I didn't know they were coming. You got a house full of people, and yeah.
And when we talk about reducing the risk, under 13 level in particular, or kids are new to the game, we would say things like, we're going to this ground on Saturday. Parking is really difficult. So what is a good conversation to have with mum and dad is, hey, drop me off at the gate and then let mum and dad take their time finding a park and walking in, so that you're not late for a warm-up.
Yeah.
So reducing the risk a lot was it was really big. And it was really simple in the end when you think about it. Like, I had all these expectations, when you come in the head of a program, and I really changed my thought around, attendance and reliability. And I changed that word to communication, in the sense that, look, if you're going to be late or you can't play, that's okay. We just need to know about it. That way we can always find a solution. So, when people wouldn't turn up and they wouldn't say anything, well, that's a different conversation to, as you said, hey, I'm going to be 10 minutes late, or I'm going to be late on the weekend. And even at Colts level now, because school rugby and junior club rugby is a bit of a luxury, in the sense that, mum and dad drive them everywhere. They turn up, they pay their fees for them. They do everything for them. Then you get out of school, all of a sudden kids are working, they're studying, they've got exams, they've got to pay their own fees in some regard. So going from that schoolboy space to that Colt space has been, I think the school space was a really good grounding in that sense. But, we'll have school first 15s come down and run against us. And, I'll say, oh, mate, our 10's not here tonight, or our 9's not missing tonight, or whatever it might be. And they just sort of look at you, and I go, no, what you need to understand is he's an apprentice builder, and his boss had to go up to Harvey Bay, which is 2 and a bit hours away, because that's their livelihood. So if they have to miss a Tuesday night to get a job finished, then that's what needs to happen.
Yeah.
And I said, all we ask with those guys is that they let us know in advance. So, and again, you change that language around communication. Like, okay, you're going to miss training on Tuesday. That's okay. So what are you going to do before Thursday to make sure that you don't fall behind physically? Or, if we've done a review preview session where everyone's in there, what are you doing to make that work up for Thursday? So, that journey and that transformation from schoolboy to young adult is really fascinating. I remember at the start of it last year, we had to sit the boys down and tell them, I don't need to get contacted by your parent or your agent or your boss or whatever. You need to have that conversation yourself. Because we were getting unbelievable. We were getting parents emailing us. We were getting, agents contacting us about why a certain player wasn't getting game time in this particular position. And, you deal with that at school with parents, which is, definitely some challenges.
Yeah.
But again, like, you're educating these young players around, you're out of school now, therefore the expectation of you is that you are in control of your week. So, we've done, little mini workshops, if you will, on how to set your week up. We sort of tie that into our mental skills, but, preparation, when you've got work, when you're going to fit gym in, when you're going to fit extras in, when you've got an exam coming up. So it's funny how much they take for granted what they get at school as far as a grounding for all that. And then that first sort of 6 to 12 months out of school, life changes a lot. So yeah, it's been really eye-opening in the sense that, again, you've got to compromise on what you think is professionalism or organized or whatever. And just that understanding that, some boys have to work a night shift or some boys have to stay overnight. So yeah, big groundings.
Yeah. And I think too, if they get that mindset when they're playing in that Colts, like under 18s and Colts, because I even find now at club level, you get guys, I can't make it tonight, I've got work, or my kids are sick, or whatever, and you can tell the guys that have done it from, a few years, because I'll just send you a message. Hey, Bully, kids are crook tonight, blah, blah, or missus is work, whatever it is. And the other guys will sort of go, they'll wait till training started and go, oh yeah, sorry, I'm running, just tell us. Like we said, we can't afford to pay you. So if you've got to work, you got to work.
Yeah. Even with there's 2 boys and I taught them and coached them at school, and now they're coaching Colts, and they're really good kids. But we started preseason sort of back into November, and we'd explain the protocol around calling our managers beforehand. And I said, if you're doing it at 5:10, it can maybe look a little bit suspicious, right?
Yeah.
18-year-old boys, right? So November, Brisbane, what's on that time of year? The Ashes, the Gabba, right?
Yeah.
So these 2 boys contacted our manager about 5:15. Oh, Hey, I was at the cricket today, and I wasn't drinking or anything, but I had a headache. So actually, we both have headaches now, so we're able to come to training. And you shake your head initially, and then they turn up on Tuesday. I said, boys, look, I'm not your teacher anymore. I said, I get it. Like, going to the Ashes, awesome. Just tell me on Tuesday. Hey, Dan, I'm going to the Ashes. I'm in a box. I'm probably going to be on the beers all day, mate. No problem. You've been honest, and we can plan in advance. And they just sort of like, and again, because it was a different sort of relationship that I had, with other boys, I guess, they just didn't want to come out and tell it. But again, you just say, go on the cricket, that's fine. Just tell us in advance. And they just sort of went, oh, okay. I said, because boys, it's not your part-time shift at McDonald's on a Thursday night that you're calling in sick for. Like, you've made a commitment to a club and a team and all that. So yeah, different to what would happen at school, because that obviously wouldn't be a possibility. So yeah.
No, that's some good advice there, mate, especially around those younger boys, just getting them in those good habits early too. So how do you keep your training environment enjoyable for your athletes when you've got, and like with you, you've got 3 Colts teams. So you've got potentially, boys that may have never played or had limited game time. And then you've got potentially kids that are looking at or are Reds Academy players on the same paddock, on the same night. How do you keep the kid that's potentially, on a good pathway to good footy, and you've got those other kids that just turn up because they want to play footy with their mates, because that kid's probably going to be the club president, or, that guy that's going to be there for 100 years and he wants something done, he's going to, so you've got to keep him there and improve him whilst keeping, those potential elite players engaged as well.
Yeah, I used the term before, Rubiks cube, and that's exactly what it is. Look, in pre-season, we try and mix the players up as much as possible, and give everyone who wants to play at the highest team, in this case Colts 1, the opportunity to do so. And that comes with its challenges, because there's quite obviously guys that would like to play there, but physically or skill-wise, they're just not there. So you sort of have to take a bit of a hit on that in pre-season just to keep them there, because one of the things I always hated as a player is, right, first grade over there, second grade over there, go your hardest. Or even at school, you'd see school programs where, that super 14A coach comes in and goes, right, I've just got my 15 players and I'm going to go down here, and B's and C's and D's, you guys just, the reality is it doesn't work like that, because kids won't come back. If kids can't see, even in their, with their rose-tinted glasses on, if they don't feel like there's an opportunity to be selected in a higher team, then they're going to lose interest. So there's times where you have to take a bit of a hit around mixed abilities being meshed together. But once you sort of mesh through that and you get to sort of trials at the end of preseason, we more or less get to our teams. What we do with our coaches is, we'll set 3 skill rotations up, for example, Colts 1, Colts 2, and Colts 3. So everyone gets the same coaching, but they're doing it at their own level or their own pace. So the Colts 3 guys who are just social players or are really, really young, they're not getting whacked by, the 20-year-old tight head prop who's played half a season of first grade already. That's a mismatch, obviously. So everyone gets the same coaching, but as I say, mixed ability groups or like ability groups, we try and sort of keep it that way. We do as much as we can together for that connection. And as you say, there's those social players who end up being the board members and the presidents and, the heart and soul of the club, really. And every club's got them, don't they? And you've got to really celebrate those sort of characters, because they're what make community clubs, essentially. And then obviously as the year goes, players are moving up and down for various reasons. But if everyone's getting the same coaching and everyone's getting the same, instruction in a way, it allows competition spots. It allows guys who want to progress, and the guys who are just happy playing social to play social. So yeah, as I say, it's not a perfect sort of model, but and again, you learn that from being in big school programs where you have to cater for big numbers. Because as I say, I've seen it the other way before where, a coach or a group just go, no, we just want to work with, and there've been players who have come to me and said, why are we still doing this? Like, they are not up to it. They're not this, they're not that. And as a player, you don't see the big picture the way that hopefully your coaches do. So you've got to explain that to players. Hey, mate, you know what? When we're middle of winter and we're 5 guys down with a flu, we might need that bloke. So whatever you think of him now, we're going to need him, because ultimately you're only as good as what you got underneath. And that's, everywhere I've sort of been, I've sort of taken that mantra in a way. And look, there's times where you're on your knees as far as depth goes, but if you don't build any depth, you won't have any depth. So you've got to at least try and build that depth. But as you say, at club footy compared to school footy, but even at school, you still have these guys that become the cult heroes, amongst their peers for one reason or another.
Yeah.
And that just gives them a little bit of sense of belonging. And even though rugby might not be their thing, but when, oh, geez, the guys in the A's or the first 15 pat me on the back, geez, I feel good. So yeah, celebrating those little wins where, those newer to the game type players do something extraordinary and everyone celebrates that. That's certainly one way to sort of keep everyone there and keep everyone happy. And then look, school footy into Colts footy, there's a big social aspect, whether they're playing Colts 1 or Colts 3. So, every social outing or event that we have, that's for everyone. Every time we warm up together, that's for everyone. So there's picking your moments where, even when it's raining, for example, we might not be able to get on the field. We might do a video session for Colts 1, but we'll go, you know what, all the other guys come in, watch this and listen to the messages that you're getting as well. So yeah, any opportunity to try and keep those guys in. And look, I've mucked things like that up before as well, where probably haven't given those types of guys enough time or voice. But you're always dealing with 300 other things. But yeah, where possible, I certainly try and keep as much connection as possible. But at the same time, when push comes to shove, you're the head coach of Colts 1, your job's to get that, but you also empower your other coaches to put their little spin on their teams too. So you can't micromanage and control everything. You have to give a little bit of autonomy to your other coaches and players as well. But yeah, the Rubiks cube, it's probably most appropriate to describe that.
Yeah, the way I look at it is the third grade 10s are blown hammy away from playing first grade.
Yeah.
Like you said, it could be in the warm up. It could be, yeah. And yeah, I've got it wrong on a few occasions as well, mate. So, it can be difficult. That's some good advice, mate. I really enjoy that. Feedback. There's a number of different ways and theories around feedback. Hopefully no one is still old school feedback. That it was, I know when I started playing, feedback was only when you got it wrong, and drop the ball and you're doing push-ups and all this type of stuff. What's your method around feedback in a session? So if you're running a skills drill, what's your method for feedback around that? And then on the bigger picture, feedback in the game, so like at halftime and things like that. And I'll put the caveat on that as different people need different styles of feedback. We know that. But what are your thoughts around it, mate?
Again, that's a really good question, isn't it? Couple of things. Like I like to coach through games a lot. And I'll explain the rules of a game at the start. And I'll look at the technical aspect, the tactical aspect. But obviously the tactical aspect is a bit more open for interpretation for them to sort of work out. So, for example, I might play a game that might go for 2 or 3 minutes. And then we'll stop, we'll come in. And one thing we've tried to do over the last 2 years is in those stoppages in play or, post a try or whatever. And again, this sort of starts at training, just slow breathing right down, a couple of breaths in and out. And then I just try and keep it really simple because I only really give them a minute in between games at training, for example. So I'll say, what do we need to stop doing? What do we need to keep doing? And what do we need to start doing? And I sort of preface that at the start by saying, when you give your answers to that as a team, bullet points, not essays, because there's always someone who wants to just keep talking. So for example, if you're playing ruck touch, for example, stop pushing the pass. All right, cool. Stop landing on your back. Good. Keep doing. We're getting the width really well, so let's keep moving the ball to the wide channel. What do we start doing? Oh, well, there's no fullback, so let's start looking for put the ball in behind. All right, cool. That's a minute. Let's go. So giving them that little framework, and I'll sort of judge them on, not judge them, but my feedback layer will, I guess, be added to, well, last time you said to keep doing this, last time you said stop doing this. How did you go correcting that or adding to that? So that's what I would try to do. Something a little more close, like a catch pass. It might just be simple as hands to chest or early catch. And so you're giving them the three, 2 or 3 cues, and then the feedback you're giving is specific to what you wanted. So if you said right up, catch pass, I want early catch, square up, you're giving them feedback on those 3 things, not 14 other things that you could easily pull apart. So just trying to keep that feedback specific to what you've given them at the start.
Yeah.
That would certainly be that. In terms of game, obviously we Colts 1, we film our Colts 2 games as well, which is good. So we'll pull things up around attack, defense, and set piece, and not just the bad things. I think it's easy temptation to just pull up the errors, but I think you've also got to highlight the positive things as well. There was one last year, for example, where we got a really crucial turnover on the try line, and all you could hear through the referee's mic was the eruption that the bench made because it was right in front of them. So highlighting that, which was obviously your Colts 2 and your Colts 3 guys, and how valuable that is. And then when you ask the boys who are on the field, like, what did that sound like on the field? They're like, yeah, tingles down your spine. It was so good because it was so intimidating to the opposition. And so even that's not even a rugby thing in it really. That's more a connection piece, I suppose. So pulling those little things up as well. And then obviously you're talking feedback, dropping players. I don't know any coaches who particularly enjoy it, but it has to be done, right? And in the movie Moneyball, where Brad Pitt's character is trying to teach Jonah Hill's character about how to cut a player in the major league, and he sort of scenario plays it. I reckon I've watched that clip 100 times, and there's a couple of elements to it that you go, that's really brutal, and there's a couple of elements that go, actually, that's probably all you need to do. So he just talks about cutting the snake off at the head, not sort of I guess mincing your words, going around. Sometimes the more you say, the more the players can pick apart, and also the longer you talk, they just stop listening as well. So with dropping a player, like, again, it's never pleasant, but I would say, for example, you're playing. I always start with, you're going to be playing Colts 2 this week. For this reason, I want you to focus on this. Mate, you're doing some really good things. You're not far away. I just want you to go back and again, I've got it wrong before as well. And I'll say that to the player. I said, look, this is just a gut feeling that I've got around selection. I might be wrong. Go out and Colts 2 and prove me wrong, sort of thing. The worst thing, and again, you go back to your experience as a player, like some of the things I saw as a player, players getting dropped, was just, you used to have a QRU, the first grade teams used to be posted on the QRU website back in the day. And I can recall guys finding out that they weren't in the team by reading the program, which would come out on a Thursday before training. No. And you just go, oh, that's pretty average. Or, a coach would remove you from a Facebook chat group at 4 a.m. on a Monday morning. And you go, oh, so I guess I'm not playing first grade this week. So I always look at that and go, I'd never want players to experience that. So I know that my job at the start of Tuesday, if I've got to make changes, I've just got to go and, pull the Band-Aid off, so to speak. But, and it's hard, isn't it? You want to be sympathetic, you want to be empathetic, but it's for the greater good. So I always try to be upfront honest. And again, I've watched other people do it before. They go, oh, look, mate, you're a really good guy. And they just keep rambling and rambling. And you just, mate, just put the poor kid out of his misery. So yeah, feedback, I guess, to the point. Try and reduce the emotion. And that's probably what I took from that Moneyball scene, is take the emotion out of it, but not completely, because, for a lot of kids, like, it's funny, some kids come out of school and they get dropped. And that's actually the first time they've been dropped from a team, because they might have played in the A's the whole way through school. They might have played 2 years of first 15, and then all of a sudden they're getting dropped, and they've never been dropped before, and they don't know how to respond and how to deal with it. And, mate, it's okay to be upset. It's okay to kick stones for a little bit, but your new team now is going to need you to bounce back. So yeah, dealing with that range of emotions, and as long as you're being specific. And then, we brought a guy in this year who works across the program, and I sort of call him a skills and transition coach. So if I've dropped a particular player down at Colts 2, Tom will follow these guys up and go, "Hey mate, how's everything going? I know Dan had a bit of a chat to you, just how you feeling about it? So what was your feedback that he gave you?" And it's good because, he might come back to me and say, "Mate, he reckons you've dropped him because of this. But you said this." And I said, "Okay, so that's interesting. So now we need to follow that up again and make sure there's no confusion." So yeah, that's been a really good little, obviously good person having the program, but just that little process around following guys up, because it's a different generation now. Like, 10, 15 years ago, you just take it on the chin. Like, I remember turning up for training one day, Jesus, going back a while. And the coach comes up to me and he says, "Oh, Dan, great game on the weekend, but Will's back this week." And I went, "Will?" I said, "Will plays in the second row." He goes, "No, mate, Will Genya, he's available for club rugby this week." I went, "Oh, right. Okay, well, I'll just be over here in second grade then, no worries." But yeah, you just take it on the chin. But now, I mean, players will move clubs at the drop of a hat, or they'll go for a soft shoulder somewhere, and that's their right to do that. But again, I think if you're consistent and you're honest as well, eventually they'll understand and respect. Not always, but the right people, I guess, will probably understand that.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to what we were talking about before, with that connection with the players. And it's as you said, no coach likes having that conversation. But I think if the players know it's coming from a good place, and you've actually got their best interests, like you said, you give them this is what I need you to work on, mate. This is the good stuff you're doing, but I just need you to work on this, this, and this. It doesn't make it any easier, but it often you get a better response from the player rather than just going, "Oh, screw you," and they walk off and you never see them again. Where, like you said, if you've got that connection with them and they know that you're genuine with it, and like you said, sometimes it's just mate, this is a gut feeling. There's not much between you and this guy, and we want to give this guy a crack on the weekend.
Yeah.
And if it's from the right place, most guys will go, "Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, no worries."
Oh, there's been a couple of occasions this year where there's 2 guys in particular, and they've gone down for whatever reason, and you just feel like you've kicked your own kid in the stomach or something. Like it was really hard, because that they bleed for the place, that they care so much, and they're going to be upset because they care. But it's a call you got to make ultimately as a head coach. And yeah, as I say, I've got it wrong sometimes, and sometimes I haven't. But like you say, if you build that trust and connection, the right people, they'll stick around, they'll understand, because you're doing it to everyone in terms of fairness of process, or try to be anyway.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like, we had one of our players was out injured, so we brought this other guy in, and mate, he was just on fire, this other guy. And a couple of the boys said, "Oh, can you just have a chat to him? He's just a bit worried that when this player comes back, when I walked over to him, I said, "How's it going?" He goes, "Yeah, good." I said, "You enjoying it?" I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Mate, I'll tell you something for nothing." And he went, "What's that?" And I said, "When so-and-so gets back, he's got to push you out of that spot."
Yeah.
And this guy just grew, like, this guy's nearly 7 foot tall now. And you could just see him go, "Ooh," and then all season now, he is just like monstering people. And I said, "Mate, that spot's yours. He's got to get it back off you." And it was just like, and he just gives you that nod. Yep, cool. And mate, he's just grown an extra leg since, because he was just going, oh, I'm just sitting here filling a hole. And I mean, we brought the other guy back, and he plays in a different spot now. But
Yeah.
you know, this guy's going, yeah, I'm actually the man. I am the man. You know, like, and now it's, you know, he got in this. Then that guy got injured, and it was so much easier to bring him back through and go, mate, do your rehab, get this done, get that done, because he knew he was then capable of playing in that role. So, yeah, just having those connections is really good.
It's funny, isn't it? Like, just that simple conversation, and they just, you know, like we've got the same issue at the moment. Like, we've had our front row. You know, there's been a guy who was suspended, but the guy who replaced him did a job. So the following week when he came back, I said, well, mate, I'm not going to change that. They've done really well. I said, you haven't done anything wrong. It's just that he's taken opportunity. Yep, cool. Then the following week, the bloke who replaced him got crook. So the other guy comes back. And then after the guy who was crook comes back, I said, well, mate, look, you literally haven't done anything wrong. It's just that he played really well when he wasn't supposed to. Otherwise, it would have been you. And you know what? Like, they're mature kids, and they just go, no, I understand. And I said, look, there'll be opportunities at some point. You've just got to be ready, sort of thing. But I guess they're good problems to have, rather than who am I going to pick?
Yeah, exactly. Coach development. I know in Australia for a long time we had coach education, which was all your, you know, sitting in the classroom and doing all that stuff and getting your bag of balls and a whistle and off you go. And I will say that it has changed over the last couple of years around the development of coaches rather than just the education piece. What's some of the stuff you do for your development as a coach?
Honestly, I love coach development. I love having conversations with people like yourself, Bully, or other coaches from other sports, or, you know, really experienced. You know, I'm really fortunate. I've got a couple of really good mentors that are, you know, probably around my dad's age. And we just sit there and just talk rugby. And sometimes it's in, you know, my context, and sometimes it's just in general. You know, I'll go home some days and just write things down that I've had in a conversation with a mentor or someone. And so I find, conversations just, really insightful. Podcasts, books, and in watching other sessions, and sometimes not even just rugby, watching other sports sessions. I just enjoy watching, training and listening to how coaches interact with players and how their, you know, instructions are and the cues they look for and things like that. One at the start of the year, at Nudgee College, there was a brilliant youth coaches forum run by Sean Graham up there. And I was really fortunate that Sean was silly enough to ask me to be one of the presenters, and you know, listening to every other coach, and they all presented on different types of scenarios or parts of the game and whatnot. But it was so well done in the sense that, yes, there was the seminar type presentations, there was on-field ones, but then there was enough space in between presentations to sit there and debrief it with people around you over a beer or a glass of Coke or whatever. And I just thought the way he did that was he mixed that conversation piece with the learning piece as well. And that's probably when you start unpacking things that, you know, the real learning occurs. So yeah, things like that, which again, don't always happen, are brilliant. But, you know, we just had the Crusaders Academy staff over last week, and just some of the things they were talking about, but then the conversation afterwards was just incredible. So yeah, I love coach development. I love coach education. You know, I've done a bit of work for the QRU around presenting on level 2s and things like that. And you know, it's not me getting up there being the instructor. I just love listening to people's thoughts on the game and different aspects of it. You know, I've still got mates overseas who, you know, still in contact with, talking about different facets of their game. You know, Rugby Australia doing a lot of things now, a lot of webinars. You know, I think COVID's taught us how to do a webinar really well. You know, Matt Taylor did one a couple of months ago now at West in Brisbane on a Monday night on defence. And, you know, just not just what he presented, but just his conversation afterwards as well. So yeah, I just, every opportunity, and my fiance probably doesn't like it, but every holiday or trip away might go on, you're always looking, oh, where's the nearest rugby club? I might, see if I can pop down, or is there a coach close by that you can sort of have a yarn with? But no, I think every opportunity, I've got to talk to people is, it's so valuable. So as I say, the conversations, podcasts, books, and just, observing, like, how good's Stan's sport been for the rugby
mate,
coach now?
Absolutely. And I think one thing COVID has taught us, like you said, how to do webinars, but just how accessible people are, and how, willing people are just to have a conversation. When I noticed, when most of the world was in lockdown, coaches are sitting around going, I need to keep my brain active. So they're just going, I'm going to be online between, there's just these coaches that you're just going to go, I would never have thought I would ever get access to, like the Stuart Lancasters and these guys that were doing like webinars and stuff. You're just going, what the hell? Like, because they're just putting information out there, and that, most people you ask are happy to chat to you about something, unless they've got a legitimate reason,
It's one thing I've really noticed, probably since Dave Rennie's become Wallaby coach, is, himself, Matt Taylor, Scott Wiseman, or as a collective national coaching group, just come across as people who just love talking and coaching rugby to anyone.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get people who might rise to the top level, and all of a sudden, we haven't got time for people down below. And I know a lot of coaches think that. They go, I'd never email that person because, I'm just an under 14s coach. Like, but it's so funny, the amount of stories you hear about those guys where, they just love turning up to a local field. Oh, fellas, do you want a hand? Oh, really? Like, yeah, so as a national coaching group, if they're doing that, I think that's just, terrific. And they're just people that love rugby, love talking rugby, and just love being hands-on. So it's funny. Sometimes you don't ask, you don't get. So it's the conversation piece, regardless of the level, people always seem to enjoy it, don't they?
Yeah, and that's it. And like you said, if you don't ask, what's the worst that's going to happen? They say no.
Or they don't respond.
Or they don't. Yeah, and worse off, really.
Yeah.
It's not. I'm like you, mate. If I go somewhere, I'll try and slip in a sneaky session somewhere with somebody, even if it's just a coffee and a chat. It's because you get something. You always get something from somebody.
Or a sausage sizzle after training.
Yeah,
Clubhouse bully.
Sitting around having a beer and talking scrums to your forwards coach. Yeah, I can't help myself, mate. I can't help myself. No, that's good. Some good stuff in there, mate. Last one, I'll let you go. If you could get in a time machine and go back to that first coaching role you had at that first 15 level, what advice would you give yourself, knowing what you know now?
Oh, I might even go right back to when I was coaching 10-year-olds even. What advice would I give? Chaos and messy training is good training.
Oh, I love it.
And that's sort of been an integral part of my philosophy, particularly probably the last 5-6 years. I reckon I used to get really worked up when, balls were being dropped on the ground or things weren't executed cleanly, and you sort of, you do cringe when you think back to it. But I'm so much more comfortable with messy training now, to the point where you look back and you just go, oh, geez, I used to carry on like a pork chop. But messy training and letting them work things out for themselves. Less talking is more powerful. And asking questions is sometimes better than just straight telling. It's funny. Like I was really hell bent on, crisp catch pass and clean breakdown and, not kicking the ball. And I reckon I've really flipped that on its head probably in the last 5-6 years or so. And sometimes now it's just like, all right, well, how can I make training even messier? So if I could tell myself that, all those years ago. That would have been helpful. And the other thing is, when you start coaching, you automatically default into how you were coached. And you have good coaches, you have bad coaches. But I think the other thing to tap into is always remember what you didn't like or what frustrated you from your coaches. And that for me was around lack of transparency and communication. I hated coaches that were disorganized, and I hated coaches that just basically tried to, fraudulently work their way through. Like, it's okay to say, you know what, fellas, I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you reckon? And I think as a young coach, I thought I had to know everything, but sometimes your players are your best resources. And even if you do feel the need to, fill your way through a group, asking questions is really helpful. Well, what do you reckon? Well, what did you see there? Well, what do you think would work?
Yeah.
Rather than just that, straight tell and I've got to know everything. Like, people ask me about scrums and things like that. And, all I used to do was put the ball in, but I've got a little bit of an idea, but the players are the ones in there doing the grunt work, so to speak. So yeah, knowing that you don't always have to have the answers. I think to progress, you probably need to, be really clued in on a couple of areas. But it's okay to have, on your coaching staff as well, people that are, and Scrum's a good example, isn't it? Someone who has actually put their head there a few times. So yeah, not having all the answers is really powerful as well, I think. And as you said before, your players will see through that too.
Yeah.
If you're not being genuine, they'll see through. Like, I watch a lot of rugby, I talk to a lot of people, but it doesn't mean you know everything. And just because they're 19 or 20 and you're a fair bit older and you've played a little bit more, but again, it's a new age now where there's so much access to resources and games. So yeah, that'd probably be the biggest things I'd say.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I remember listening to Wayne Smith on a podcast, like the professor of all coaches, and he went, I've watched a lot of scrums. He said, but I don't know what goes on in there. He said, that's why, but he goes, I know, like he said, the basics. He said, but I get a guy to do that for me.
Yeah.
You just go, mate, if this guy can admit that, I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
Because I still don't know what wingers and fullbacks do, but anyway.
Try and run fast, mostly.
Yeah, try and run fast. But yeah, and I think, like you said, players appreciate it more and respect you more when you go, mate, I don't know. Let's give it a crack. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good, mate. That's some good advice. Thank you so much for your time, Dan. This has been great. I've got a few pages of notes here.
Thank you for having me, Bully. It's as I say, I love listening to podcasts, but I like that you've sort of tapped into the people at the grassroots level, in the sense that it's contextual to, people coaching the under 11s or under 12s and or the Colts or something like that. So I think it's a real niche that you've sort of tapped into. So no, I really appreciate you reaching out.
No worries.
Having a chat.
Thanks, mate, and thanks for your time.
Pleasure, Bully.
Righto, mate.
Off their own ball. That is monstrous.
Held at the back by the foot of Ben Morgan, kept in